Why was she even on the helicopter? That's what Lieutenant Graves was thinking as the Chinook roared through the Afghan night. Chief Petty Officer Alina Vance sat near the ramp, knees tucked tight, surrounded by giants. SEAL Team 4 Alpha Platoon. Men who moved through darkness like water through cracks. Men who trusted each other with their lives. And then there was her. The attachment. The cultural support. The woman sent to search Afghan females and translate broken Pashto while the real operators did the real work. She could feel it in the way Graves leaned toward her, shouting over the rotor noise, his face hidden behind night vision goggles and a balaclava. His body language said everything his words didn't. "You're a liability. Stay out of the way. Don't get my boys killed." "Chief Vance," he barked into the comms loop, "remember your lane. Once we hit the dirt, you stick to Miller. You search the females, you interpret. If we take contact, you bury your head. Clear." "Clear, sir." Flat, neutral, she didn't take offense. Graves was new to the platoon, eager to prove he could bring everyone home safe. To him, she was a checkbox, a mandatory requirement from Big Navy because you couldn't kick down doors in a Muslim village without someone to talk to the women. He didn't know about the competitions at Quantico. He didn't know she could read wind traces on dry sand better than his lead sniper. He didn't need to know. The interior of the MH-47G smelled like hydraulic fluid, unwashed bodies, and metallic anxiety. It was a smell Alina had known for 6 years. It never stopped making the hair on her arms stand up. She ran her hands over the SR-25 rifle strapped across her chest. 7.62 millimeter. A heavy beast, usually reserved for designated marksmen. Tonight, she was an extra set of eyes that could reach out and touch someone from 800 meters. If they let her. The Chinook flared hard. G-force pressed her into the nylon webbing. The ramp dropped into swirling dust, green light. The team moved like liquid. Alina flowed with them, stepping off into the soft, treacherous moondust of the riverbed. The air outside was freezing, sharp, a brutal contrast to the baking heat of the helicopter. High above, the peaks of the Hindu Kush blocked out the stars, jagged teeth tearing at the sky. "Viper Actual, this is 1-1. Touchdown. We are moving to Waypoint Echo." Graves whispered into the radio, his voice ghosting through the platoon channel. "Copy 1-1. Be advised, ISR is intermittent. Clouds are thickening over the target area. You are on your own for the next 30 mics." Alina adjusted her plate carrier. It felt heavier tonight. The silence of the valley was wrong. Usually there were dogs barking, the distant hum of a generator, the smell of wood smoke. Tonight the valley was a vacuum. No dogs, no lights, no life. "Miller," she whispered, clicking her comms. Miller was the heavy weapons guy, the only one who had bothered to learn her first name. "Go ahead, Lenz." Lenz, her call sign, because she saw things others didn't. "It's too quiet. Even the goats are asleep. Keep your spacing wide." "Copy that, you getting the itch?" "Yeah, the bad kind." They moved in a ranger file, boots crunching softly on loose shale. The village lay 2 kilometers up the wadi, a cluster of mud brick compounds clinging to the cliffside like a wasp's nest. Alina scanned the ridgelines through her night vision. Green phosphorescence washed over the terrain. Every boulder looked like a man. Every shadow looked like a gun barrel. She raised her SR-25, looking through the optic. The glass was pristine, bringing the jagged rocks into sharp focus. She scanned the high ground, the key terrain, nothing. But the feeling in her gut twisted tighter. It wasn't the presence of something that scared her. It was the absence of life. The decision to send them here, based on a single source of intel about a high-value target, felt rushed, felt wrong. "Hold." Graves raised a fist. The column froze. 30 meters ahead, the entrance to the village began. A single goat path led up into the maze of walls. "Row check," Graves hissed. "Positive identification required. No fire unless fired upon. There are civilians in those structures. Watch your sectors." Alina took a knee, her rifle scanning the rooftops. A curtain fluttered in a window on the second story of the largest compound. Just wind or movement. She zoomed in. For a split second, she thought she saw the glint of a lens, glass reflecting starlight. "Sir," Elena said, her voice urgent but controlled, "I have possible movement sector northeast, high structure, possible optic reflection." Graves paused. "I don't see advance, don't jump at ghosts." "It was there, sir." "Push on, we have a schedule." Elena lowered her rifle slightly, her finger hovering outside the trigger guard. She wasn't jumping at ghosts. She knew what looking down a scope felt like, and she knew when someone was looking back. They stepped into the village shadows. The trap was already set. They just hadn't heard the click yet. The transition from the riverbed to the village wasn't just a change in terrain. It was a shift in dimension. The ground turned from loose shale to hard-packed clay and jagged stone steps that wound upward like a scar on the mountainside. The village wasn't built on the mountain. It was carved into it, a vertical labyrinth of mud brick walls and overhanging terraces that blocked out the sky. Alina felt the burn in her quads immediately. Her kit weighed 60 pounds. Plates, ammo, radio, water, and the long SR-25 strapped across her chest. Every step was a calculated effort to distribute that weight silently. Beside her, Miller was breathing in short, controlled huffs. The MK-48 machine gun he carried was a beast. In this thin mountain air, oxygen was a luxury item. "Spread out," Graves whispered. "Watch the high windows, don't bunch up." The order was sound, but execution was nearly impossible. The alleyways were claustrophobic, barely wide enough for two men to walk abreast. The walls pressed in, radiating the cold of the stone. Alina kept her eyes moving, her night vision painting the world in grainy, surreal green. She scanned the rooftops, the gaps in the walls, the darkened doorways that looked like empty eye sockets. Too quiet. The thought hammered in her brain, syncing with her pulse. She had done a dozen key leader engagements in this valley. Even at 2 in the morning, a village breathed. You should hear the shifting of goats in their pens, the cough of a sick child, the low murmur of prayer, or at least the aggressive barking of the feral dogs that guarded these compounds. There was nothing, just the sound of American boots on ancient stone, and the wind whistling through the peaks above. "Actual, this is Lens," she keyed her mic, keeping her voice to a subvocal whisper. "I have 0 ambient noise. No dogs, no livestock, no cooking fires. Recommend we RTB and reassess. Return to base. Call it off. Come back in daylight with air support and drones." Negative, Lens. Intel is time-sensitive. High-value target is mobile, we push. Alina's jaw tightened. Intel was always time-sensitive. High-value targets were always mobile, but her gut was screaming now. This wasn't caution. This was certainty. Something was waiting for them. They reached the central compound, a 2-story structure with thick walls and a wooden door reinforced with iron bands. Graves signaled for the breach team. 2 SEALs moved forward with a battering ram. The rest of the platoon took up security positions, rifles trained on windows and roof lines. Alina knelt beside Miller, her back against a low wall. She scanned her sector. Still nothing, but her finger moved closer to the trigger guard. The ram hit the door once, twice. The third time the wood splintered. The breach team flowed inside, their helmet lights slicing through the darkness. Room clear. Hallway clear. Moving to second floor. The voices crackled through the radio, professional, calm, routine. And then the world exploded. The first burst of machine gun fire came from the ridge above. Heavy caliber, PKM by the sound of it. The rounds chewed through the stone wall where Miller had been standing a second before. He dove left, dragging his machine gun with him. Alina hit the ground, her shoulder slamming into the hard-packed earth. Contact, contact. Heavy machine gun, high ground northeast. Graves's voice, no longer calm, cut through the chaos. The second burst came from the south. Another position, crossfire. The SEALs inside the compound tried to exit, but the doorway was a fatal funnel. One man stumbled back inside, his leg torn open by shrapnel. "We're pinned, we can't move." Elena crawled behind a low stone wall, her heart hammering. The machine gun fire was relentless, methodical. Whoever was behind that gun knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't spraying and praying. They were controlling the battlefield. Viper Actual, this is Viper 1-1. We are combat ineffective. 7 casualties. Miller is bleed-out critical. We are pinned by heavy machine gun fire from the ridge. We cannot move. Graves's voice was tight, controlled, but Elena could hear the edge of panic underneath. Copy 1-1. QRF is 20 mics out. Keep heads down. Air support is denied due to civilian proximity. Do not engage unless you have positive ID. 20 minutes. Miller was bleeding out. The machine gun had him pinned behind a stone trough that was disintegrating under the impact of incoming rounds. Elena could see him from her position. His face was pale. His hand was pressed against his thigh, trying to stop the arterial spray. 20 minutes was a death sentence. And then she heard the voice in her headset. Her own voice, calm, breathless, overlaid with the sharp crack of snapping concrete. Actual, this is Lens. My primary optic is shattered. I'm moving to the ridge. Lens, negative. Hold your cover. You are an intelligence asset, not a breacher. Stay with the wounded. That is a direct order. Elena looked at Miller. His eyes were glassy. His lips were moving, but no sound was coming out. If I stay, Miller dies. She could see it, 30 meters out. A Dragunov SVD rifle lying in the dirt beside a dead insurgent. The enemy sniper had been hit by suppressing fire from the breach team. His weapon was just lying there, abandoned, waiting. It was the only glass left in the valley. Lens, you are exposing yourself too. I'm not asking, sir. I'm telling you I'm going hunting. She cut the transmission. What does it feel like to choose? Not the choice between right and wrong. That's easy. This was the choice between dying in place or dying while moving. Between watching Miller bleed out behind a stone trough or crawling into the open and maybe, giving him a chance. Elena didn't think about it. Thinking was the enemy. Thinking got you killed. She moved. Low, fast, using every dip in the terrain, every shadow, every piece of cover the valley offered. The machine gun fire was focused on the compound. The gunner hadn't seen her yet, but he would. The moment she broke from cover, he would swing that barrel and cut her in half. 30 meters felt like 30 miles. Her shoulder blades itched, waiting for the impact, waiting for the world to go white and then black, but it didn't come. She reached the dead insurgent. The Dragunov was there, still warm. She grabbed it, rolling behind a low berm of rock and dirt. Her hands moved on instinct. Bolt back, check the chamber. Loaded, the optic was intact. A Russian PSO-1 scope, 4-power magnification. Crude compared to her SR-25, but it worked. She pressed her cheek against the stock. The wood was rough, splintered. It smelled like gun oil and sweat. She scanned the ridge through the scope. There, the machine gunner, silhouetted against the night sky. He was repositioning, shifting his field of fire. She could see the PKM's barrel glowing faintly from the heat. She could see his chest rising and falling. 800 meters, uphill, wind from the east. The PSO-1 reticle had range-finding marks, but they were metric. She had to convert in her head, fast. She exhaled slowly, let half the air out, held it. The Dragunov kicked hard. The report echoed through the valley like thunder. The machine gunner dropped. Silence. For 3 seconds the battlefield went quiet. The PKM stopped firing. The SEALs stopped shouting. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. And then the second machine gun opened up. Alina didn't have time to celebrate, didn't have time to process the shot. She was already moving, crawling to a new position. The return fire chewed through the berm where she'd been lying a moment before. "Lenz, what the hell are you doing?" Graves's voice, shocked, angry, relieved. "Hunting, sir." She found a new hide, a collapsed wall with a gap just wide enough to shoot through. She scanned for the second gun. It was firing from a different position. Lower, closer. The muzzle flash gave it away. 600 meters, downhill, easier math. She fired again. Missed the round, sparked off a rock 2 feet to the left. The gunner swung toward her. She could see the barrel moving, could see the loader feeding a fresh belt. She adjusted, breathed, fired. The loader dropped, the gun went silent. But there were more. She could hear them now, voices shouting in Pashto, orders being given. The ambush had been planned, coordinated, and now it was falling apart because one woman with a stolen rifle was dismantling their plan piece by piece. Alina moved again. Her knee screamed in protest. She'd landed hard during the initial burst and something had torn, but pain was information. Information could wait. She found another rifle, an AK-47 lying beside a dead fighter. She grabbed it, checked the magazine, 3 rounds left. She pocketed the mag and kept moving. The ridge above was crawling with movement now. They were trying to flank, trying to get an angle on the pin seals. Alina saw them moving through the rocks, shadows against shadows. She dropped into a prone position behind a pile of rubble, used the AK, short, controlled bursts, 3-round bursts at moving targets. The rifle was crude, inaccurate beyond 200 meters, but at this range it didn't need to be pretty. One figure dropped, then another. The SEALs inside the compound were returning fire now, coordinated, disciplined. The pressure was shifting, the ambush was breaking. But Alina wasn't thinking about tactics. She wasn't thinking about strategy. She was thinking about Miller, about the thumbs up he'd given her during pre-mission brief, about the way he'd learned her first name when no one else bothered. She was thinking about Graves, about the new lieutenant trying so hard to bring his boys home safe. She was thinking about the valley, about the silence, about the feeling in her gut that had been right all along. And she was thinking about the shattered glass of her SR-25 scope, the pristine optics she'd trusted, now just fragments, but it didn't matter. She didn't need American glass to see the truth. The truth was simple. You don't leave your people behind. Not when there's still breath in your lungs, not when there's still a trigger to pull. Alina crawled toward the next position, the next rifle, the next target. She wasn't hunting anymore. She was surviving. And in this valley on this night, those two things were the same. How many lives does a rifle hold? Alina didn't know the answer, but she was learning it in real time, one trigger pull at a time. The Dragunov was empty now. She'd left it behind after the last shot took down a fighter moving through the rocks. The AK-47 had maybe 10 rounds left. Not enough. Never enough. She needed more ammunition, more guns, more time. Miller's voice crackled through her headset, weak, strained. "Lenz, where are you?" "Close, stay down, QRF is coming." It was a lie. QRF was still 15 minutes out. 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours. She crawled through the rubble, her hands slick with blood. Some of it was hers. Her knee had torn open when she'd hit the ground earlier, and now every movement painted a thin red trail in the dirt. But most of the blood wasn't hers. It belonged to the men she'd dragged herself past. Enemy fighters, dead, dying. She didn't stop to check. There was another position ahead, a nest, a sniper's hide carved into the rock face. She could see the barrel of another SVD poking out from behind a pile of sandbags. The shooter was focused downrange, firing methodically at the compound. He didn't see her coming. Alina moved like smoke, silent, Low. The pain in her knee faded into background noise. Her body was running on something beyond adrenaline now, something primal, something that didn't have a name in any language. She closed the distance, 10 meters, 5-3. The sniper sensed her, turned. His eyes went wide. Alina didn't give him time to react. She drove the barrel of the empty AK into his throat, crushing his windpipe. He dropped, clawing at his neck, gasping for air that wouldn't come. She didn't watch him die. She was already grabbing his rifle. The SVD was loaded, fresh magazine. The scope was intact. She dropped into the nest, pressing her eye against the optic. The valley spread out before her in sharp, perfect clarity. She could see the compound, could see Graves dragging a wounded seal toward cover, could see Miller slumped against the stone trough, his hand still pressed against his thigh. She could also see the fighters, at least a dozen, moving through the rocks, flanking, coordinating. They were good, disciplined. This wasn't some ragtag insurgent cell. This was a planned operation. And it was falling apart. Because no one had planned for her. Alina began firing, methodical, controlled, one shot, shift, one shot, shift. The SVD kicked against her shoulder with each pull of the trigger. The brass ejected hot, clinking against the rocks. Target down, shift, target down, shift. She wasn't counting anymore, wasn't thinking. Her hands moved on autopilot. Muscle memory forged from years of training. From competitions at Quantico where she'd outshot men twice her size. From countless hours on the range, learning to read wind and distance and the microscopic tremor of her own heartbeat. The fighters scattered, broke, ran. She kept firing. And then the rifle went dry. Click. The sound was louder than any gunshot, louder than the roar of the Chinook, louder than the machine gun fire that had started this nightmare. Click. Empty. Alina dropped the rifle and rolled out of the nest. She grabbed the PKM machine gun lying beside a dead gunner. The belt was half spent, but there were still rounds left. She didn't know how to operate a PKM, had never trained on Russian crew-served weapons. But a trigger was a trigger, and desperation was the best instructor. She braced the heavy gun against a rock, aiming downrange. Pulled the trigger. The gun roared to life, spitting fire and brass. The recoil was brutal, slamming her shoulder back with each burst, but she held it, controlled it. The suppressing fire bought the SEALs time. Graves was moving now, dragging Miller toward better cover. The rest of the platoon was consolidating, forming a defensive perimeter. And then the PKM went dry too. Click. Alina let the gun drop. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, from exhaustion, from the weight of everything she'd just done. She looked around the nest. Empty casings littered the ground like brass rain, 4 rifles, 1 machine gun, all empty. She'd scavenged life from death, traded metal for seconds, seconds for survival. But it had worked. The valley was quiet again. The enemy was gone, broken, scattered into the mountains. Alina stood on shaking legs. Her knee buckled and she caught herself against the rocks. She could hear the distant thump of helicopters. QRF, finally. She keyed her mic. Viper actual. This is Lens, ridge is clear, the path is open. Graves's voice came back, hoarse, shaken. Copy Lens, we're moving, stay put. Medic is coming to you. Alina sank down against the rocks. Her hands were still shaking. She looked at them, covered in dirt and blood and gun oil. These were the hands that had pulled 18 triggers. These were the hands that had ended 18 lives. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a mechanic who'd run out of parts. But the engine was still running. The team was still alive. And sometimes that was enough. What does safety sound like? For Alina Vance, safety sounded like the roar of a C-17 Globemaster's engines, like the hydraulic whine of landing gear retracting, like the calm, professional voice of a flight medic checking her vitals while the Afghan mountains disappeared beneath the clouds. She was strapped to a gurney, an IV line running into her arm. The medic had cleaned and dressed her knee, stitched the gash that ran from kneecap to mid-thigh. They'd pumped her full of morphine, but she could still feel everything. The pain, the weight, the memory of every trigger pull. Miller was 3 gurneys down, pale but alive. The tourniquet had saved his leg. Barely. He'd given her a weak thumbs up when they loaded him onto the plane. That same thumbs up from the pre-mission brief. Only this time it meant something different. "We made it, you saved us." Alina closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she tried, she saw the valley, saw the glint of the scope on the ridge, saw the faces of the men she'd killed through Russian glass. 18. That was the number Graves had radioed to command during the extraction. 18 enemy combatants neutralized. It sounded clinical, professional, like something from an after-action report. It didn't sound like the weight pressing against her chest. Didn't sound like the ghosts that would follow her to Germany, to Virginia, to every quiet moment for the rest of her life. The plane banked and her stomach lurched. Or maybe it was the morphine, or maybe it was the realization that she was safe now, truly safe. Thousands of feet above the mountains, thousands of miles from the valley, but the valley was still there, etched into the glass of her mind, a scratch that would never buff out. How did you come home from something like that? How did you walk back into the normal world and pretend you were the same person who'd left? She thought about the cultural support mission. The original plan: search the women, translate, stay out of the way. She'd violated every part of that plan, crawled into the kill zone, scavenged enemy weapons, conducted a one-woman siege using ordnance she'd never been trained on. She'd violated a direct order. She'd saved 23 lives. The dissonance made her nauseous. The speed of modern logistics meant you could be killing people on Tuesday and watching cable TV in a hospital bed on Thursday. The brain couldn't keep up. The soul got left behind somewhere over the Caspian Sea. Preparing for descent. The pilot's voice crackled over the PA. Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in 30 mics. As the plane banked, the change in pressure popped Alina's ears. For a second the sound was gone, and in that silence she heard it again. Clicking. The click of the empty Makarov. Clicking. The click of the empty SVD. Clicking. The click of the empty PKM. She squeezed her eyes shut, her hands gripping the sheets. She wasn't a hero. She was just a mechanic who had run out of parts. She had scavenged life from death, trading pieces of metal for seconds of time. 18. Graves had said the number. It sounded like a score. It wasn't a score, it was a weight. 18 ghosts following her to Germany. The wheels touched down with a screech of rubber. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing the massive beast. The war was officially thousands of miles behind her. But as the ramp lowered, letting in the damp gray chill of a German morning, Alina knew the truth. The valley wasn't behind her. It was inside her. And she had never felt more terrified. The air in Virginia Beach smelled of salt spray and jet fuel. But inside the windowless room on the second floor of the command building, the air smelled only of recycled ozone and floor polish. Chief Petty Officer Alina Vance stood at the position of attention. She wore her service dress blues. The fabric was stiff, immaculate. Her ribbons were perfectly aligned. The only flaw in the image was the cane leaning against the table and the slight involuntary tremble in her right leg when she shifted her weight. Across the polished mahogany table sat Commander Sterling, a man with silver hair and eyes that had read too many casualty reports. Beside him was a thick file folder stamped with red block letters, Top Secret/NOFORN. At ease, Chief, sit down. Alina sat, keeping her back rigid. She rested her hands on her knees, careful not to put pressure on the healing incision, where the surgeon had reconstructed her femoral artery. Sterling opened the file. He flipped past the maps of the valley, past the satellite imagery of the ambush site, stopped at a series of grainy photos taken by the QRF recovery team. They showed the ridge, the wadi, the bodies. "I have read Lieutenant Graves's report," Sterling began, his voice neutral. "I have read the statements from the surviving members of Alpha Platoon. They are consistent, remarkably so." He slid a photo across the table. It showed the nest where Alina had fought the sniper. The dead insurgent she had used as a shield was visible. The empty SVD lay in the dirt. "According to the official timeline," Sterling continued, "the platoon was pinned down by a heavy machine gun and multiple maneuvering elements. Air support was denied, and yet 18 enemy combatants were neutralized in the span of 12 minutes. The heavy gun was silenced. The sniper was countersniped. The flanking maneuver was broken by—" He paused, looking at the paper. "Heavy weapons fire from a position that didn't exist on our charts." Alina remained silent. There was nothing to say. The math was on the table. Sterling looked up, locking eyes with her. "You are an intelligence specialist, Chief Vance. Your role was cultural support. You were there to search women and children. You were not there to conduct a one-woman siege using enemy ordnance." "The situation evolved, sir," Alina said, her voice steady. "The team was combat ineffective. I had a line of sight. I took it. You abandoned cover. You violated a direct order from the ground force commander to remain in place." "Yes, sir." "You utilized non-standard weapons without ballistic testing or safety checks." "Yes, sir, they worked." Sterling sighed, leaning back in his chair. The harsh fluorescent light hummed overhead. He tapped the file with his pen. "If I put this in the official record, if I write down that a female support sailor crawled out of a kill zone, scavenged 4 Russian weapons, and saved a SEAL platoon single-handedly, it becomes a circus. The press will want a name, the politicians will want a photo op, and the enemy will have a face to target." He closed the file. The slap of the cardboard cover echoed in the room. "We don't do circuses here, Chief. We do results." Sterling pulled a single sheet of paper from a separate folder. It was a citation for a Navy Commendation Medal with a V device for valor. The text was generic: "For meritorious service, providing suppressing fire, assisting in the extraction of wounded personnel." It was a lie by omission. It turned her blood-soaked crawl into a polite paragraph. It erased the 18 men. It erased the SVD. It erased the bayonet. "This is the official narrative," Sterling said, sliding the paper toward her. "The specific details of the engagement are classified Level 1. You will not discuss the scavenged weapons. You will not discuss the kill count. As far as the Navy is concerned, Alpha Platoon fought its way out with organic assets." He picked up a pen and held it out. "Do you understand, Chief?" Alina looked at the paper. It was an eraser of history. But then she thought about the wadi. She thought about Miller's thumbs up in the C-17. She thought about Graves telling her to survive. She didn't need the world to know. The men knew. That was the only currency that mattered. "I understand, sir," she said. She took the pen. She signed her name. "Good," Sterling said, his demeanor softening slightly. "Dismissed, Chief." Alina stood up, grabbing her cane. She came to attention, saluted, and turned to leave. "Vance," Sterling called out just as she reached the heavy steel door. She stopped. "Sir." 18, he said quietly. "That's good shooting with any rifle." Alina nodded once, then pushed the door open. The hallway outside was bright. Waiting against the opposite wall were 4 men. Lieutenant Graves, his arm in a sling. Miller, looking pale but upright. 2 other SEALs from the platoon leaning on crutches. They weren't in dress uniforms. They were in working fatigues. They didn't say anything when she stepped out. There were no cheers, no slow claps. That was for the movies. Graves pushed off the wall and walked over to her. He looked at the closed door of the SCIF, then at her. He knew what had happened in there. He knew the story had been buried. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. He handed it to her. "From the boys," Graves said. Elena opened the box. Inside wasn't a medal, wasn't a ribbon. It was a glistening, jagged shard of glass. The piece of her shattered SR-25 scope he had saved from the hospital, but now it had been drilled and mounted on a small silver chain. "We know what you saw through that glass," Miller said, stepping up beside Graves. "And we know what you did when it broke." Elena closed her hand around the shard. It was cold, sharp, real. "Walk with us, Lenz," Graves said. "Beers are on Miller. He missed the most shots." "I was suppressing," Miller protested, a grin breaking through his tired face. Elena hooked her cane over her arm and adjusted her step to match theirs. They walked down the long, sterile corridor together, a limping, broken formation of 5. She wasn't just an attachment anymore, wasn't just the cultural support. She was the one who had crawled into the dark so they could see the light. She was the lens, and she had seen clearly. Sometimes respect isn't given. It's earned in silence, one choice at a time. Sometimes dignity doesn't need a stage or a spotlight. It doesn't need the world to applaud or a medal to validate what happened in the dark. Dignity lives in the crawl, in the breath between decisions, in the weight you carry so others don't have to. Elena Vance had 18 reasons to never speak of that night. 18 ghosts, 18 clicks of empty rifles. But she also had 23 heartbeats still pounding because she refused to stay down. The official record would forget her. History would erase the details. But the men walking beside her would remember. And in the end, that was the only medal that mattered. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.